My name is Evelyn Maywood, and at 75, my days move with the slow, familiar rhythm of an old clock whose ticks you no longer hear. Until suddenly, you realize it has stopped. My house, too, ticks in its own way. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the old wooden walls carries a memory of a life once full, once vibrant, once shared. The mornings are the quietest. I wake before the sun, as I always did when my husband George was alive. Old habits never die. They linger like ghosts you learn to live with. I sit by the window with my tea, watching the light spread across the garden we planted 52 years ago. He used to kneel next to me in the soil, laughing when I scolded him for crushing the marigolds with his boots. I still hear that laugh sometimes, in the corners of the rooms, in the rustle of the curtains, in the hush of dawn. Now it's just me. But I tell myself I am not lonely. I have my books, my garden, my knitting, my old radio that still plays songs from the 60s if you hit it just right. And most importantly, I have my grandchildren. Or, I thought I did. I raised 2 children of my own, my son, Harold Jr., and my daughter, Melanie. Good children, successful in their own ways, but distant, like stars you can see but never touch. They call on birthdays, send photos on holidays, and promise visits that rarely come. I learned not to expect too much. Life takes people in different directions. It's not their fault. But my grandchildren, they were my joy. Evan, at 17, used to cling to my apron strings. As a boy, he followed me around the house asking 1,000 questions. Now he barely looks up from his phone, his voice low and flat as if speaking to me costs him something. Lila, 15, once braided my hair, sat in my lap, and asked for stories about her grandfather. Now she rolls her eyes at everything I say, as if my words come from another world altogether. Sophie, 13, was always the gentle one, my little shadow. But even she has changed, absorbed into the world of screens and sarcasm. Still, I open my door to them every weekend. I cooked their favorite meals: chicken stew for Evan, lasagna for Lila, and blueberry muffins for Sophie. I set their places at the table, warmed the house, and kept board games ready, pretending they might someday want to play again. But slowly, something in their visits shifted. It began with small things. A giggle when I forgot a word. A murmur between them when I dropped my keys. A shared, secret smile when I walked slower than I used to. They thought I didn't notice, but old age sharpens your intuition more than it dulls your senses. I laughed it off at first, teenagers tease after all. But this felt different. Their laughter didn't feel like the soft, familiar warmth of inside jokes. It felt sharp, hollow, like an echo in an empty room. It carried no affection. One afternoon, as I poured tea for them, I heard Evan whisper, "Watch this," and all 3 snickered. When I turned around, their faces snapped back into innocence, too quickly, too rehearsed. Somewhere deep inside, something tugged at me. A worry. A question. A quiet ache that said, "You are no longer someone they respect. You are someone they find funny." I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just a phase, that they were growing up, that they still loved me even if they no longer showed it. But the truth is, love doesn't disappear suddenly. It drains slowly, silently, drop by drop, until one day you look around and realize the well is almost empty. I didn't know it then, but those small laughs were seeds. Seeds of something cruel. Seeds of something I was not prepared for. Seeds that would grow into a storm that would shake the quiet years of my life in ways I never imagined. And all of it began with the simple belief that I would always forgive them. That I was, after all, just Grandma. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I first realized something was terribly wrong. The sun hung low, spilling warm light across my living room as I dusted the shelves, slowly, carefully, the way old hands must. My knees ached, but the familiar sting reassured me that I was still myself, still here, still capable. The doorbell rang. Before I could reach it, the door burst open and my grandchildren tumbled in. Evan leading, Lila behind him, Sophie drifting in like a shadow. "Grandma, we're here," Evan announced without waiting for a response. I smiled, though a part of me tightened. Their visits had become less about spending time with me, and more about wandering through my house, as though it were some kind of playground. But still, I was grateful. I clung to the presence of youth the way one holds onto a fading song. "Come sit," I said. "I made cookies." They didn't answer. Instead, they spoke to one another in whispers, glancing at me with mischievous smirks. Something inside me shifted uneasily. As I returned to the kitchen, I heard the faint click of a camera. Or a phone. A familiar sound, but out of place. I turned. Sophie's phone was raised. She quickly lowered it. A flush of guilt spread across her cheeks, but she didn't apologize. None of them did. Later, as I carried the cookie tray toward the living room, they exchanged glances again. The kind of glances that hide secrets. That's when it happened. A loud bang went off behind me. Sharp. Sudden. Violent. A firecracker. My heart leapt into my throat. The tray slipped from my fingers, scattering cookies across the carpet. My breath hitched, my hand clutching my chest as panic surged through me like a bolt of electricity. Behind me, laughter erupted. Loud. Cruel. Unrestrained. I turned, trembling. Why did you do that? Evan doubled over. Grandma, your face, oh my God, I got it on video. Lila wiped tears from her eyes. You almost fell. That's going to go viral. My mouth opened, but no words came. My voice hid somewhere deep inside my chest, afraid to come out. It's just a joke, Grandma, Sophie said softly, though her tone carried no apology. Just a joke. Just a joke. Those words cut deeper than the firecracker's explosion. My knees felt weak, not from age but from humiliation. I bent to pick up the cookies with trembling hands. They didn't help. They didn't stop laughing. They didn't care. That night, after they left, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. My heart ached. Not from fear, but from the realization that something innocent between us had cracked. Something sacred. A few days later, the truth revealed itself in full. I was trimming roses in my front garden when my neighbor, Margaret, walked over with a worried look on her face. Evelyn, dear, are you all right? Well, of course, I said, brushing dirt off my gloves. Why do you ask? She hesitated, then held out her phone. Have you seen this? I took the phone with a steady hand, but by the second video, my hand began to shake. There I was on the screen, my startled reaction to the firecracker, replayed in slow motion. Another clip showed me searching for my glasses while Lila whispered, "She's losing it." Another captured me muttering to myself in the kitchen, with the caption, "Crazy Grandma talking to ghosts." My breath caught. Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. Is she okay? Someone get her into a home. Old people are hilarious when they freak out. Do more pranks on her. I couldn't breathe. The world blurred at the edges. Your grandchildren posted these? Margaret asked gently. I swallowed hard. It appears so. That night, I watched every video. Every cruel caption. Every laugh at my expense. What I saw was not a harmless joke. It was exploitation. It was humiliation. It was betrayal. And somewhere between one cruel clip and the next, something inside me hardened. If they wanted to treat me like a joke, they would soon learn something they had forgotten. A grandmother's silence is not weakness. It is warning. I wiped my tears, steadied my breath, and closed the laptop. This wasn't over. And it would never be, just a joke again. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My body was tired, my bones a little stiffer, but my mind was sharp. Age may have slowed me, but it hadn't dulled me. Not for this. Not now. I walked through the living room, my hands brushing the polished surfaces, my eyes catching the sunlight glinting off old family photos. George would have understood. He always said, Evelyn, sometimes the quietest women make the loudest statements. Today, I was going to prove him right. First, I did what any smart, careful woman would do. I gathered evidence. I started with the obvious, screenshots of the videos, comments, and captions. Every cruel remark, every just a joke, every laugh at my expense was saved. I organized them meticulously, noting the date, time, and device. Each piece was a small nail in the coffin of their illusion of innocence. Then I moved to the subtler things, the pranks they hadn't recorded but I had witnessed. Evan hiding my cane and laughing when I stumbled. Lila moving my medication bottles around for fun. Sophie pretending to trip me while filming it on her phone. These weren't jokes. They were harassment. They were recklessness. They were dangerous. By the time the afternoon sun had sunk low, I had a folder full of proof. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming the dignity they had stolen. I called Harold Peterson, my late husband's old friend, retired from the police force but still sharp as a tack. He didn't need to hear much. His silence said it all. When I explained the incidents, the videos, the pranks, and the growing harassment, he didn't flinch. This isn't teenage mischief, he said. This is elder abuse. Cyber harassment. Reckless endangerment. You've got more than enough to make them answer for this. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt power. Not anger, not spite, not bitterness, but power. Power that came from knowledge, evidence, and patience. I took my time. I didn't confront them immediately. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for an apology. I waited. I observed. I let them continue their foolish confidence, letting their own arrogance reveal more of itself. Every careless laugh, every phone recording, every mocking glance added another layer to the case I was building. I began documenting conversations, too. When Evan tried to justify a prank, I recorded it. When Lila laughed about a video going viral, I wrote it down. Sophie's soft, nervous giggles and murmured confessions were added to the file. Each one was a brick in a wall I was quietly constructing around the truth. And then came the day I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need to be angry to win. I didn't need to yell or cry or punish with my own hands. The law would speak for me. And it would speak louder than I ever could. I filed a report with Harold's guidance. The process was methodical, calm, precise. I explained each incident, handed over my folder, and answered questions clearly. I didn't embellish. I didn't plead. I stated facts. Cold, undeniable facts. Afterward, I went home and sat in my armchair, sipping tea, feeling an unusual serenity. The world had not yet turned in my favor. My grandchildren still roamed my house, still laughed without realizing what was coming. But soon, very soon, the joke would be over. And when the knock finally came, it would be the knock of reality, of consequence, of respect demanded. I thought about the life I had lived, the loss of my husband, the indifference of my children, the betrayal of my grandchildren. And I realized something. Revenge was not about cruelty. Revenge was about dignity, about taking back what was yours, about standing, finally, as yourself, untouched, unmocked, unafraid. I smiled faintly. I had waited 75 years for life to teach me patience. And it had. Now it was time for justice to teach them respect. No one would ever again call me weak. No one would ever again assume my age meant helplessness. And most importantly, no one would ever again think that their laughter could hurt me without consequence. I folded the folder, laid it carefully on the table, and poured another cup of tea. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the house. The quiet before the storm, I thought. And I was ready. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind of day when sunlight spills lazily across the floorboards, painting the living room in a warm golden hue. My grandchildren lounged carelessly on the couch. Evan had his feet kicked up, Lila was scrolling endlessly on her phone, and Sophie fiddled nervously with a game controller. I carried a tray of freshly baked cookies, my hands steady, my heart calm. Though beneath the surface, a storm had been building for weeks. Cookies, anyone? I asked, setting the tray on the coffee table with a soft clink. They barely glanced at me. Their laughter had grown dull, routine, mechanical. I understood now that they had long ceased to respect me. Not because I was old, but because they had never been taught what respect truly meant. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat quietly in my armchair, observing them. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to scold. The law was about to speak for me. Then, knock. 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 The sound came sharp and deliberate at the front door. My grandchildren froze mid-laugh, mid-motion, as if the knock itself had struck them physically. Evan frowned. Who could that be? I smiled faintly. Let's find out. I opened the door to reveal two police officers, professional, calm, and holding printed evidence in hand. Their uniforms bore the quiet authority of the law, a power my grandchildren had never truly encountered. Mrs. Maywood? One of the officers asked politely. We're here regarding the report you filed. Evan's mouth fell open. Lila dropped her phone. Sophie let out a small, terrified gasp. The officers stepped inside, their eyes sweeping the room. They addressed the children directly. We need to speak with you about several incidents involving harassment, reckless endangerment, and cyber exploitation of an elder. For a moment, the room was utterly silent. The laughter that had seemed so constant and casual was gone, replaced by confusion, fear, and the heavy weight of reality. It was just a joke. Evan blurted, his voice shaking. The officer's expression remained neutral, professional. It stopped being a joke when someone was harmed, when your grandmother's safety was jeopardized, and when videos were shared online for public ridicule. Lila's face drained of color. Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. I remained seated, my hands folded over my cup of tea, calm as a lake in winter. I didn't need to raise my voice, to scold, or to punish. I had already done the hardest work, gathering the evidence, presenting the facts, and waiting for the natural consequence of their actions to arrive. When my children arrived, Harold Jr. and Melanie, they were frantic, embarrassed, and angry. Mom, what have you done? Melanie demanded. I looked at her steadily, my voice calm, unwavering. I did nothing. They did. And now they must answer for it. No one interrupted. No one argued. The officers spoke, and the law's clarity filled the room. My grandchildren would face consequences. Counseling, community service, and a series of corrective actions aimed at teaching them respect, accountability, and empathy. As the officers led them out, I could see the weight of realization settling on their shoulders. No longer were they invincible, laughing at someone weaker. No longer would they see me as someone they could mock with impunity. When the front door closed behind them, the house felt different. Lighter. Quieter, not with loneliness, but with reclaimed dignity. I poured myself another cup of tea, sinking back into my armchair. The sunlight danced across the floor, casting shadows that seemed to bow in acknowledgement. I thought of George, long gone, and whispered softly, "You were right. Quiet women can make the loudest statements." Weeks later, my grandchildren returned, timid, cautious. They greeted me politely, asked before taking photos, helped around the house. Their laughter no longer carried cruelty, only tentative warmth. They had learned a lesson, not one I had forced with anger, but one the world had delivered, guided by my patience and resolve. Sitting in my chair, watching dust particles drift through the sunlight, I realized something profound. Revenge is sweetest when it is quiet, precise, and restores what was taken. I hadn't sought to break them, only to reclaim myself. For the first time in years, my house felt like it had returned to me. My dignity, my peace, my voice, untouched, unmocked, unafraid. And in that moment, I understood fully that the truest victory is not in inflicting pain, but in standing tall, calm, and resolute, knowing you have won without losing yourself in the process. And so the storm passed. But I remained. And no one, not even my own grandchildren, would ever again take my strength for granted.